You know what's strange? Most people can watch horror movies. They sit through car crashes, broken bones, surgery scenes, but show them a tiny drop of blood, maybe just from a paper cut, and their legs go weak, their vision goes blurry, and the next thing they know, they're waking up on the floor. And here's what nobody tells you about that. It's not a weakness, it's not being dramatic, and it's definitely not all in your head. People who faint at the sight of blood have a nervous system that's doing something completely unique, something that scientists only recently started to understand. And honestly, once you hear the explanation, it changes everything about how you see these people. Today we're breaking down the psychology of people who fear blood. This one is genuinely fascinating because blood phobia, or what psychologists call hemophobia, is actually the strangest phobia that exists. And I mean that literally, because unlike every other phobia on the planet, this one comes with a physical reaction that is completely backwards from what fear is supposed to do to your body. So in this video, I'm gonna walk you through why it happens, what's actually going on in the brain, how it starts, and why these people are often some of the most emotionally sensitive and self-aware people you'll ever meet. And if this is something you deal with personally, you're about to feel very, very seen. Let's start here, because this is the part that surprises most people. When you're afraid of something, spiders, heights, public speaking, your body does the same thing every time. Your heart speeds up, your blood pressure goes up, your muscles tighten, adrenaline floods in. Your body is getting ready to run or fight. That's the classic fear response. Every phobia triggers it, except this one. People with blood phobia actually faint. And fainting is the opposite of what fear is supposed to do. Your heart doesn't speed up, it slows down. Your blood pressure doesn't go up, it drops. Blood rushes away from your brain and you lose consciousness. Psychologists call this the vasovagal response, and it's the only phobia in the entire classification system that triggers it. So why does this happen? There's a theory, and it's a good one, that goes back to our ancestors. Imagine someone gets wounded in a battle or a hunt thousands of years ago. If they're bleeding badly, fainting actually lowers their heart rate and drops their blood pressure. That slows down blood loss. It might even make them look dead to a predator. In other words, fainting at the sight of blood may have kept people alive. So these individuals aren't broken. Their nervous system is running an old program, one that was written to protect them. That's not weakness, that's evolutionary memory. Now here's where it gets deeper, because the physical response is only half the story. There's something happening psychologically in people who have this fear that most people completely overlook. Research shows that people with high sensitivity to blood and injury stimuli tend to have what psychologists call a more reactive insula. The insula is a region deep inside your brain. It processes disgust, it processes physical sensations in your body, and it's very closely tied to empathy, your ability to feel what other people feel. Studies using brain scans found that people with strong disgust reactions to blood and gore show significantly higher activity in this region. Their brains are literally more activated by the sight of physical harm, not just to themselves but to others. Think about what that means for a second. These people aren't just afraid of their own blood. They are deeply, almost involuntarily affected by the idea of anyone being hurt. Their brains are wired to register injury at a much higher intensity than most people's. That same sensitivity that makes a paper cut feel catastrophic is often the same sensitivity that makes them incredibly attuned to other people's pain. This isn't a flaw in the system, the dial is just turned up higher than most. Here's something that comes up again and again in the research on blood phobia. Most of the time, it doesn't start with something dramatic. You would think, okay, someone must have had a traumatic injury, a bad accident, something that scarred them. And sometimes that's true, but often it's not. A lot of people with hemophobia trace it back to something incredibly small. A doctor's appointment at age 7, watching someone else get a cut, and seeing the adults around them panic. A vivid description of surgery they overheard. A scene in a movie they weren't old enough to process. Their brain made a connection in that moment. Blood means danger. Blood means something is very wrong. And the nervous system filed that away. And the cruel thing about phobias is that they build on themselves. Every time someone faints or feels sick around blood, the brain strengthens that connection. Every time they avoid it, look away, leave the room, skip that scene, The brain gets confirmation, yes, this is something to escape. So avoidance, which feels like the only relief in the moment, is actually the thing that makes it worse over time. Psychologists call this the avoidance cycle. And it doesn't just apply to blood phobia, it applies to nearly every anxiety response humans have. The more you escape, the more your brain learns that escaping was necessary. Now, this is the part that I find most interesting, because when you look at the research on people who have strong reactions to blood, injury, and physical vulnerability, there's a personality pattern that shows up consistently. These people tend to score high on what psychologists call harm avoidance. They are naturally wired to be more cautious about physical risk, more sensitive to pain in themselves and in others, and more likely to feel distress when watching anyone suffer. They also tend to score higher on empathy measures, specifically something called affective empathy, the kind where you don't just understand that someone is hurt, you actually feel it with them. There's a reason why a lot of people with blood phobia become incredibly uncomfortable watching medical procedures even when they know intellectually that the person is going to be fine. Their nervous system doesn't care about the intellectual reassurance. It feels the pain anyway. And this crosses over into their relationships in quiet ways. These are often the people who can tell when something is wrong before anyone says a word, who feel responsible for the emotional climate of a room, who carry other people's pain longer than other people do. Sound familiar? In many ways, blood phobia is less about blood and more about being someone whose nervous system was built to feel things more intensely than most. Now, it's important to be honest here, because for some people, this is more than just a discomfort. For some people, it genuinely interrupts their life. There are people who have avoided going to the doctor for years, not out of laziness, but because the thought of a blood draw sends them into a panic spiral. People who have passed out alone at home from a small wound and frightened themselves deeply. Medical students who had to leave programs they loved because clinical environments became impossible to navigate. And there's something that doesn't get talked about enough, which is the shame that comes with this. Because we live in a world where people associate fainting at the sight of blood with being weak, squeamish, soft. And so a lot of people with hemophobia carry this quiet embarrassment about something they never chose and didn't create. They laugh it off, they make a joke about it before someone else does. They quietly figure out how to avoid situations without anyone noticing. That's a lot of energy spent managing something that most people around them don't even think about. And if that's you, understand that you're not making it up. You're not being over dramatic. The fainting is real. The panic is real. The neurological pathway behind it is documented and measurable. You're not broken. You're just wired for depth in a world that doesn't always make room for it. Here's the good news, and is genuinely good. Blood phobia is one of the most treatable phobias that exists. The main treatment is called applied tension, and it's a technique developed specifically for vasovagal fainting. It's almost counterintuitive. Instead of trying to calm yourself down, you actually tense your muscles, legs, arms, stomach, to raise your blood pressure before it drops. Studies show this can prevent fainting in the vast majority of people who learn it. Then there's graduated exposure. Slowly, carefully, with support, someone begins to approach the thing they fear, starting at the furthest distance possible. A cartoon image of blood, then a photograph, then a medical video. The brain starts to update its threat response because it keeps surviving the exposure without the catastrophe it expected. This isn't about pushing through fear until you're numb to it. It's about teaching your nervous system that it got the danger assessment wrong and giving it evidence over time to revise it. Most people who go through this process see dramatic changes, not because the sensitivity disappears, but because the panic response finally gets recalibrated. The brain is not fixed, it learns, and that means it can unlearn too. So here's what we know about people who fear blood. Their nervous system runs an ancient protective response that once helped humans survive. Their brains register pain and physical harm at a higher intensity than most, which is connected to deep empathy and emotional sensitivity. The fear usually starts small and builds through a cycle of avoidance. It often coexists with a personality that feels more, notices more, and carries more than most people around them realize. And it is treatable. Not just manageable, actually treatable. But more than anything, if you're someone who has lived with this quietly, who has felt embarrassed about it, who has built whole routines around hiding it, I want you to hear this. You are not weak. You are not strange. Your nervous system learned something a long time ago and has been protecting you with that information ever since. The work isn't to become someone who doesn't feel things. The work is to help your system feel safe enough to finally update. That's not a small thing, but it's possible.